Touchdown BC is sponsored by
the Robertson Braun Group, Remax Kelowna. Thinking real estate in Kelowna? Think Blake Robertson, Marlene Braun. For more information, call 250-212-2888 or 250-878-5242.
Touchdown BC is also sponsored by Subway and the Subway Bowl. The Subway Bowl hosts and supports the BC High School Football Championships and amateur football around the province.
Welcome to Touchdown BC. I'm your host, Adam Kordick, and joining me to my left is my co-host, Ty Clark. Ty, there was a common theme among all football games that were played in the Lower Mainland this past weekend. They all had to weather the storm.
Adam, that was a terrible joke, but you're right. It was disgusting out. It was a good thing that at least it heated up with some nice football action.
Yeah, no, UBC was in Saskatchewan, not in the Lower Mainland, but they were in Saskatchewan in tough against the Saskatchewan Huskies. Also, we had some great high school games still being played, and the BCFC had their semifinal matchups with two teams moving on to the Mullen Cup. So let's not wait any longer. Time to get in the action. This past weekend, both semifinal games were played in the BCFC, with the winners moving on to the Mullen Cup. This season was one of the most competitive years to date, so it was fair to think that both these games were going to come down to the wire, and that is exactly what happened.
Westshore Rebels versus the VI Raiders, BCFC semifinal. Westshore was 1-0-1 against VI in the regular season. Opening kickoff of the game, Jamel Lyles receives the kickoff at his own 7 and welcomes everyone to the game in the only way he knows how, with a touchdown. Lyles goes end-to-end, burning everyone in sight for the 103-yard kickoff return. What a way to start off the game. Next, Rebels possession. A bad snap forces Westshore to concede a safety to make the score 7-2. Couple possessions later, Ashton McKinnon looking for his receiver, but VI linebacker Dexter Shea has other plans. Shea gets the pick and returns it to midfield. Couple plays later, QB Jake LaBerge hits Adam Finnick near the sidelines. Finnick makes a couple guys miss, but in the process fumbles, and Rebels would recover. Rebels would not score, though. Early second, VI gets 3 on this James Parker field goal to close the gap to 2. Later in the second, Rebels get the ball back after VI conceded a safety. McKinnon looks deep and connects with Nate Pinto deep for a big gain. That would lead to a field goal by Kyle Clark, 12-5 now. Just before the half, the Raiders get their first major of the game. LaBerge to the BCFC's leading receiver, Dustin Rodriguez, and D-Rod is in to make it a 12-12 tie ball game at half. What a game. Early third Q, LaBerge looking to pass, sees Hugh Rainey open down the seam, heaves it up, and Rainey makes an unbelievable catch, which would then set up another James Parker field goal to give VI the lead. Rebels get the ball back. McKinnon looking to run on the speed option. He gets hit, tries to lateral it, but fumbles. Cole Vertanen recovers for VI, which leads to Parker connecting on another field goal, 18-12 Raiders. Late third, Rebels drive the field and end up in the end zone on the McKinnon QB keeper to lead by 1. Rebels get the ball back. McKinnon looks to run, but in this rainy weather can't hold on to the rock, and it's Vertanen again with the fumble recovery. VI gets another field goal from James Parker to lead 21-19. In the fourth, Rebels take the lead again from 2 good runs from Campbell, which sets up McKinnon for his second rushing major of the game and puts the Rebels ahead 26-21. 2 minutes left in the game. It's Nate Berg finishing off a great drive into the end zone to give VI the lead. Very next kickoff, the Raiders sky kick it. Short ball, but bounces around until the Raiders land on it first. Is this the end of the Rebels season? Westshore's D would get the ball back for its offense after a missed field goal that led to a rouge. A minute 20 left, no timeouts. The Rebels prove once again why they are the best in the BCFC. McKinnon connects with Pinto, and then Kane Melikor makes 2 very clutch catches. 20 seconds left, Rebels 2 yards out, give it to Jamel Lyles, and he finished the game like he started it in the end zone. The Rebels win 34-29 in a thriller and are moving on to the Mullen Cup. The Rebels were led by Jim Lyles, who got the rock 25 times for a $198 and the winning score. The Rebels will host the Cullen Cup in 2 weeks in Langford. Who will they be playing? Let's find out. In the other semi-final game, the Okanagan Sun hosting the Langley Rams. The Sun won both games against the Rams in the regular season. Mid-first, the Sun get on the board first. Liam Wishart gets the ball on this toss play, has the edge, and he will score. Okanagan up 7-0 early. Rams next possession, Colby Peters looking to pass, but is picked off by Raquel Cespedes. One of his 2 picks on the day. This will not be the last time we'll hear from number 18. That would lead to a Keely Hines field goal. In the second, Hines again connects, this time from 20 yards out, 13-0 Sun. 3 minutes left in the half, and the Rams respond with a field goal of their own from Tiernan Doherty. Not once, but twice to make it 13-6. 19 seconds remaining in the half. Okanagan Sun QB Keith Zyla looks deep down the sideline, and Shamar Donaldson sneaks behind the D for the big reception, and he will do the rest, running it in for the score. Sun lead 20-6 at the half. Middle third, Rams start to mount a comeback. Zyla is picked off by Brendan Desjardins, BCFC All-Star, and Desjardins returns it to the Suns' 10-yard line. And he is pumped, as he should be, because it sets up this. Tommy Robertson rolls out, hits his target, Jules Keller, and Keller will cross the plane for the TD to make it a 1-score game. Early fourth, the Rams keep digging. Robertson hits J.J. Jackson in stride, and Jackson has a free ride right into the end zone. We are all tied up. It can't get any better than this. Rams would get the ball back, and Tiernan Doherty connects from 43 yards out to give the Rams their first lead of the day. Later, Sun looking to punt. The ball would bounce, and remember when I told you we weren't done with Cespedes? Well, he is also the punter. He comes out of nowhere to recover the punt and get the ball back for the Sun, which leads to another Keely Hines field goal. That knots this one up at 23 with 4 minutes to play. With 2 minutes to play, the Sun get the ball back, hand it to their running back, but Desjardins strips him and recovers. This is insanity. Now Rams, Tiernan Doherty for what could be the win, misses wide. Rams think it was good, but the refs say no. We are heading to overtime. First possession, Rams, third down, looking for points, but it's a fake field goal. All Okanagan has to do is get a field goal. Keely Hines for the win, and it's good. What a game in Kelowna. The Okanagan Sun win 26-23 over the Langley Rams and are heading to the Cullen Cup. The Okanagan Sun were led by kicker Keely Hines, who was perfect on his field goals all day, including the winner in overtime. That sets up the Cullen Cup game that will go down October 29th at West Hill Stadium. The Westshore Rebels versus the Okanagan Sun. If the semifinals were that good, I can't wait for this one.
After a relatively slow week of football during the Thanksgiving long weekend, community football was back this weekend in a big way. Now let's take a look at some of the action.
To Bantam we go. Valley Thunder with the ball. It's Ethan Lang in the carry. He finds a seam and bursts it up the right side for the score, which unfortunately was called back. So the Knights look to counter, but not on Justin Crooks' watch. Great penetration. Thunder back to work, but the Knights show that their D can get it done too. Big sack there. Middle ridge is turned, but James Grimison can hold on to it. And that fumble's got me grimacing. Wow, Thunder D secure another turnover. Now just watch what comes next. Valley Thunder with the bad snap over both players' heads. And look who's right there to scoop it up. Kieran Davies says thank you for the score with a defensive touchdown. The Knights' confidence skyrocketed after that with another score in the third Q and a nice run by Javon Anutushkin last quarter. Just to put this one out of reach, Cody Hogarth bootlegs out right, makes a nice cut, splits the D, and muscles forward for the W. Over to Junior Bantam we go, and the Giants hand it off to Logan Buckwitz to get them on the board from the get-go. Later in the first, Giants take to the air, and it's Michael Hopwood on the receiving end of this cannon by Grayson Frick. Giants up a couple scores early on. Next Q, and it's Michael Hopwood doing it on the ground this time, taking the reverse the other way, and blowing it right by the competition. Giants offense looking mighty impressive so far in this one. Abby White with the ball, hoping to counter, but the Giants D steps up with a pick. And look at this, folks. Doesn't this duo look like the Brady-Gronk connection? Grayson Frick wearing number 12 for a reason, and a short pass would be all that's needed for Buckwitz, who's got the size and speed of Gronkowski, as Buckwitz soars easily. That connection would go right back to work again, but this time on the ground as Buckwitz really works for the incremental yardage after contact, moving that pile into the end zone. But the playbook surprises don't just stop there. Frick hands it off to Davies Mitchell, and he takes this one the other way, through a defender, and in for the score. Giants get it back once again, but this time they use a different weapon. Caleb Spanner throws a missile to guess who? That's right, Michael Hopwood for his third of the day, and that would be it for this one. Time for some Pee-wee ball. Opening cue, Lucas Fever tossed it out wide for Pearson Capstick, and he's out to block for his buddy, but he wouldn't need it. But the Giants proved their toughness on both sides of the ball, Big Blue coming up with a forced fumble. Later on, Fever tossed it to Capstick once again, who dangles in between a couple defenders before having the ball stripped out of his hands too. Meadow Ridge's Justin Brunswick with the forced fumble redeeming his earlier blunder. Devin Crenshaw scoops the fumble up and goes all the way to pay dirt. Great defensive touchdown there, 85 yards of pure speed, Meadow Ridge down 8-6. Giants Blue with the ball, and they've got some tricks up their sleeve. Unfortunately, the flea flicker doesn't work out with Meadow Ridge on the receiving end of that one, thanks to Jackson Allen. Giants Blue trying to get the ball rolling, but not this kind of rolling. Lucas Fever loses his grip, and Jackson Allen is there for Meadow Ridge once again. Near the end of the fourth, Meadow Ridge needing to get some points on the board. Vincent Bradnauer doesn't give up on the run. He comes back with a huge strip, forced fumble, all but securing the win for the Giants.
Time now for the Subway BC High School Football Report. Conference play is well underway throughout the province this past weekend. Teams did not only have to play against their opponents, but had to play against Big Bad Mother Nature. Most of the games that were played around the Lower Mainland were played with high winds and a ton of rain. Oh yeah, football weather. Let's get right into the highlights.
Handsworth, Rutland, a battle of the Pacific Conference. First quarter action, and it's Handsworth out of the gates, first on a big run down the left sidelines to get them within the 10-yard line. A couple plays later, and bang, John Mooney with the TD for Handsworth. But Rutland would march right down the field, and it's Isaac Young getting the toss out right, and he heads right for the corner of the end zone to tie the ball game up at 7. So it's Handsworth time to go back to work, and this time the ball is deflected out of Jake Bennett's hands right into the hands of a Rutland defender. Rutland would not score, so next cue we go, and Handsworth makes them pay with a nice run up the gut, 14-7. Still in the second, Handsworth back at it. This time it's Sam Thole connecting with Dane Hopkins as Handsworth ups the ante by 2 scores. Rutland gets the ball back. They complete a nice 20-yard catch to put them within the 15-yard line. And just like that, Rutland runs it in to only trail by 7. Handsworth with the ball, and they hand it to Leon Kioya, friend of the show, who scampers in for the score here. Later, it's Kioya again. To finish it off for Handsworth, they beat Rutland 34-14. Abbotsford, Earl Marriott, and out of the gates, it's Samuel Uko doing what he does best, exploding past the sprawling D-line and out of sight. Abbotsford up 7-0 on their first offensive play of the game. Abbey would score again before this one as Uko runs it in for Abbey's third touchdown of the quarter, 21-0 Panthers. Believe it or not, Abbotsford would score again. Earl Marriott gets stripped. Abbey flexes their guns defensively as well with a fumble return TD, their third defensive touchdown of the quarter, 35-0 still in the first. Good to see the Marriott players staying warm on the sidelines in a rainy one, but the Panthers would score their 5th touchdown now into the second quarter. Earl Marriott with the ball now, and they have a lot of work to do, to say the least. So they give it to their one-man wrecking ball, Daniel Damron. No wonder he's wearing number 1 on his jersey, because he is doing it all, which makes the score 42-7. Still in the second cue, John Madigan throws a deep ball, and he finds Tanner Marquardt for his second touchdown of the game. Panthers up 49-7. Later on, Panthers ball, they hand it off to Samuel Uko, and you know the rest. That's right, Uko explodes up the gut for another touchdown. The score now 56-7, Abbey. Abbotsford back at it again. This time Madigan's pass is picked off by Daniel Damron. Once again making a highlight reel play, but that would not be enough as Earl Marriott loses to Abbotsford 62-14. Now let's take a look at the Pacific standings. The Abbey Panthers are on top with a record of 2-0 in conference play. To the Western Conference scores we go. Mount Douglas continues their winning way against Notre Dame. Belmont edges Carson Graham in OT. And for the first time since the New West Hayaks started back up in 2003, the Hayaks get their first win against BC in AAA varsity ball. Now let's take a look at the standings. Mount Doug is still on top with New West, Notre Dame, South Delta, and BC with 2 conference wins apiece. Now let's take a look at the scores from the Eastern Conference from this past weekend. Mount Boucherie hands Lord Tweedsmuir its first conference loss of the season. Terry Fox continues to roll with their win over Kelowna. STM beats Mouat, and Centennial remains perfect in conference play with a win over Mission. Now here's a look at the standings. Terry Fox and Centennial still unbeaten in conference play. To the TD BC top 5 we go. Mount Doug and Terry Fox remain at number 1 and number 2. After the win, New West switches spots with Vancouver College, and Centennial remains at number 5. To the AA East scores we go. Argyle beats Bateman. Langley gets the W over Salmon Arm, and GW Graham shuts out Holy Cross. Now let's take a look at the standings through 3 weeks. Here is a look at the AA West scores from this past weekend. Seaquam beats Barsby 40-19, a game that was played on a Monday due to weather, and Windsor shuts out Bolanis. Hugh Boyd and Seaquam are on top, both undefeated in conference play. That might change as the 2 teams will play against each other this weekend. Here are the scores from the AA Okanagan Conference. Valley View beats West Side in OT, and Vernon gets the win over C. Fulton. Now let's take a look at the standings. This week's BC High School football game of the week has 3-1 Lord Tweedsmuir visiting 4-0 Centennial this Friday night at 7:30 at Percy Perry Stadium. That game will be streamed live at sportscanada.tv.
Time now for the BC High School report. Joining me as he does each week is Dino. Dino, different set this time. We're standing. It's gonna be
good.
Awesome. Okay, Dino, let's get right into it. Let's start first with New West taking on Vancouver College and defeating them 13-10. This is the first time New West has defeated Vancouver College in varsity since the rebirth of their team in 2003.
Well, that's the monkey off the back game, and I think they've been close. If you remember back to last year, they were really close. Couple things happened in the 4th quarter just to go the other way, so kudos to New West. I knew they had the solid team to be able to play with Vancouver College and to beat them. I know they're ecstatic in their camp.
And I know we talk a lot about a grade 10 quarterback out of Mount Doug, Gideon Kremler, but what could you say about Kinsale Phillip for New West?
Well, another kid that I know because he's come through and played Team BC, he's just a real tough kid, real knowledge for the game, and obviously playing against him the week before. He's just going to be one of those guys that you really look forward to playing and watching play as the years go through, along with Gideon.
Speaking of Gideon Kremler, your Notre Dame Jugglers hosted the Mount Douglas Rams this weekend, losing 28-14, and obviously Kremler didn't have maybe the passing you'd expect from him, but the rushing, had almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's just beyond his years in figuring the game and his savvy, and just a couple of times he was, you look like you have him, and our players look like they have him, and then all of a sudden he just scoots through and makes a play out of it. So he's a treat to watch. I don't really like to watch him against us, but he is a treat to watch, and you must appreciate, and I think all our coaches were saying, just appreciating his age and what he's been able to do, and obviously last year's provincial championship as a grade 9. He's just heading for future stardom as well.
To the Pacific, we've seen Abbey move up from AA to that Pacific Conference, and now the last 3 weeks they're putting up almost 60 points per game against against the Pacific Conference division. What do you think their ceiling is? I know that Pacific Conference is not as competitive as the East and the West, but maybe heading into the playoffs, what could Abbotsford's ceiling be maybe when they come and take on one of the premier teams of the Eastern or the Western Conference?
Well, I think it's yet to be seen. I think they've had some great performances already. They've got some great athletes. I think you just got to see how they come out of that Pacific Division. Playoff football, as you know, is a different beast when you start talking about, the Mount Dougs, the Terry Fox, College, New West. I think they're still a step away, but they still have a few weeks to get things in order. And I'd watch for Argyle in that Pacific Division coming together and playing some good football.
And I know you have a trip coming up to, you're going to be heading to Bella Bella in northern BC. Tell us about what you're going to be doing there.
Well, it's part of working with some coaches and a lot of what I do with fundamental movement skills and physical literacy. And a couple of years back, I put together just a curriculum for fundamental movement skills in football. And all the skills in football, running, throwing, catching, jumping, are all those fundamental movements. So we're going to be doing some of that up in Bella Bella and hopefully working some football with some young kids and promoting the game.
That's awesome, Dino. And we're going to be catching up with Dino next week from Bella Bella, hopefully. And Dino, thanks for joining us. And that is your BC High School Report with Dino Geremia.
With 3 games left in the season, the BC Thunderbirds would need a big win against the Saskatchewan Huskies in order to find themselves in a favorable position taking on the top 2 teams in the Canada West. With a 1-7 record against the Huskies in their last 8 matchups, would the Birds be able to flip the switch against a familiar foe? Let's find out.
UBC taking on Saskatchewan. Huskies looking to score, but UBC's goal line D makes the stop. And it's a big fumble recovery from Malcolm Lee. But the Huskies would be back. Jarvis James takes the rock to go up a score. Same cue, and it's almost like deja vu. Jarvis James scampers up the gut once again for his second of the evening. Now it's UBC's turn to go back to work. Michael O'Connor finds one of his favorite targets, Travell Pinto, and in classic Pinto fashion uses that speed and elusiveness to put UBC behind a score. Back to Siemens in the Husky offense though. Julon Lynch loses grip on and scores probably the luckiest touchdown of his career. Michael O'Connor trying to use his legs, but wham! That's why he doesn't run too often. Siemens back at it and he finds his boy Mitch Hillis on the slant. There isn't a T-Bird within 5 yards of him. Juggle Fest 2016 would continue with Ben Cummings coming down with this one, setting up a field goal. But it was Kyle Siemens once again finding his favorite target, Mitch Hillis, this time somehow escaping past 3 Thunderbird defenders as he too would be off to the races, but nobody would be able to catch him as he scampers all the way in for the score. And that would be the ball game. Sask 40, UBC 10. Michael O'Connor did not fare as well as his counterpart Kyle Siemens, who finished with 346 yards and 3 touchdowns, but Ben Cummings did finish with 23 more yards in the ground than the entire Saskatchewan team. Mitch Hillis led the way amongst receivers with 175 yards and 2 touchdowns on 10 receptions. The Thunderbirds' next game will be on the road once again, this time against the Regina Rams on Friday night at 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
Welcome to the UBC Report. Joining me as he does every week in studio is Mr. Jim Mullin. Jim, we talked about the numbers last week. 1-7 their last 8 against the Huskies. Didn't get it done again today. How did Kyle Siemens play against Michael O'Connor?
Kyle Siemens, his debut was last year, and it was against the UBC Thunderbirds, and he threw for 539 yards. So he likes playing against the UBC Thunderbirds. UBC missing some key components in their lineup, and that's tough, when you've got 78 players to start the season, and you've got a great number of first and second year players. I believe the number's somewhere around 54, so they're a young team. I think a lot of people don't realize that, and the people that are wondering what's going on with the Birds right now may take a look at that lineup and go, hey, I don't recognize a lot of faces on defense, and I think that's where the breakdowns really occurred.
You know what, Jim, and I always like to look at things in a positive light, and this was the first time all season that the UBC running game actually did something. Ben Cummings with over 170 yards. Was this more about the offensive line creating holes, or could could we just say that Saskatchewan's run defense was pretty poor?
I talked to Blake Nill after the game at the airport, and I said to him, I said, you know, if Ben would have gone off for 174, I wouldn't have predicted a score like this, a 30-point gap. And he's happy that the offensive line is finally showing some signs to live up to what their potential is. They had a very slow start this year. But make no mistake, the UBC Thunderbirds on offense, they're a team that really needs to go out and outscore their opponents. That they have to anticipate that their defense, with the stage that they're at, with their youth on defense, is going to give up around 32 points a game, 33 points a game. The running game can give them some balance, but you know, Michael O'Connor, a little off target, throwing a few high passes here and there, a little off the back foot, but there's still something not quite clicking on a consistent basis with the passing game.
Now, if we're going to look ahead to Friday night's game, what are the keys to success for the Thunderbirds?
The keys to success are getting some confidence back in the passing game. I think they missed Morrison on the wide side more than they thought they would, and they can take advantage of a Regina Rams secondary that does give up a lot of yards. Conversely, on the defensive side, they have to show more in terms of their pass defense than they did against the University of Saskatchewan. They've got Regina has a talented group of receivers, 3 of them over 100 yards per game, and you've got Noah Picton, who's throwing at a clip of 400 yards per game, and he's the odds-on favorite right now, being the Heck Creighton Award winner. So I would think that Regina's going to be fairly hungry coming back to Mosaic Stadium, and their last regular season game at the old Mosaic Stadium. So I think the emotion's going to come back for them. This is going to be really tough for the Thunderbirds. Make no mistake about it.
Well, you know what? Hopefully the UBC Thunderbirds are hungry as well. That's UBC Report with Jim Mullin. Well, that does it for us here. Another week of Touchdown BC. Adam, your alma mater prevailed once again.
Yeah, the only time I cheer against the UBC Thunderbirds is when they play the U of S Huskies. This time, I was on the winning end of things, and you know, we made a bet about the whole helmet. You have to wear the U of S helmet if they lost. I'm not going to make you do that this episode. We'll talk about that a little later on. Just I don't want to have the embarrassment of this episode for you. We're going to wait till it's a perfect timing where you're super embarrassed. But tune in next week. We're going to have more high school football. UBC is going to look to get back in its winning ways. And also, we're going to have a preview of the Cullen Cup in the BCFC. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next week, and take care.
Touchdown BC is sponsored by
the Robertson Braun Group, Remax Kelowna. Thinking real estate in Kelowna? Think Blake Robertson, Marlene Braun. For more information, call 250-212-2888 or 250-878-5242. Touchdown BC is also sponsored by Subway and the Subway Bowl. The Subway Bowl hosts and supports the BC High School Football Championships and amateur football around the province.